Professor Manzini, thank you so much for accepting to talk to us today. It is a deep, real privilege of having the possibility to have an interview with you. For us, for me, at our program, Habits by Republica, you are royalty because you are in the field of sustainable design, social innovation, and design for sustainability for a long time. But you are a founder, so the nature of your work has always started with founding things. You have founded the service design in the 90s. You have founded the DESIS network. We're going to talk about this. It's your prodigious child, in a sense. You have founded the design innovation program at the University of Arts in London. So you do like and are passionate about founding programs and theories and ideas that are important to the world. I would like to start by asking you, thanking you once again for being in the program with us. I would like
Thank
to
you.
ask you what initially drew you to this concept of viewing design as also a philosophical practice rather than just making things, because you started with studying materials and engineering, and then you came to your philosophy, which of the role of design, which you explain in the Politics of Everyday. So what drove you to this? What did you find in your mind, in your activity, that drove you to this concept of
Well,
the role of design?
I can answer in a more general way, and I can answer in a very personal way. To make it short, the general way is that design is a kind of a coin with double face. One face is related to making things function, functionality, efficiency, etc. And the other thing is about meaning. You call it philosophy, but before becoming philosophy is meaning, telling stories. So there is telling stories. So if there is no telling stories, it's not design. So design, at least in the way that we use the term design, because in English, design is also the one of the engineers. Normally, the engineers do not need to tell stories. The only story that they say is this work. Afterward, in my view, there is a hidden story that things work in a certain way, also in the design of the engineer. Simply, they have not to tell it. They simply say, I make my calculation and it works. When the problems are such that you cannot assume that it is enough to say that work, but it enter in what is called the wicked issues, the issues that are complex, the issues that are not solvable with a formula, you need not only to have something that works, but also to tell the story why that way of working, it's okay. So afterward, there are some moments and some moment in design in which it's more needed to invent new stories, and some moment in which the stories are the ones that are already been told. So for instance, when design started, the story was the story of the modernity. So everything was good, that it worked because it was coherent with a certain view of the modern life. And afterward, for a while, it was not so necessary to be so modern. To tell the story, all the story about progress and modernity, because it was obvious that he was designing something in that line. And afterward, now I don't tell all the stories. There have been some change at a certain point. Also, the very famous Italian design of the 70s, 80s started to tell a new story that was not only related to the functionality of things, but was related more clearly to the meaning of things, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, given that all the story about progress is not collapsing, it's already collapsed since a long time, all the design stories, all the design culture that was based on a certain idea of progress has to be reformulated. Because you have to retell the story of what does it mean to design something for the good, because the underlying story of design is in any case to do something for the good in general. At least this is what we have to say. But what does it mean to do something for the good in the new context, in which it's clear that technology, it could be good, but it's not per se bringing prosperity to everybody. The capitalistic way of thinking the society, not even, the neoliberal, even less, and the differences are more and more, and there are a lot of problems. So we have to, in some way, invent new stories. So probably, for me at least, the design intended as a community of design. Afterward, each one has its own particular story, but the community of design has the necessity to retell the story. And retelling the story, there is also something you can call philosophy, but designers are designers, philosophers are philosophers. So in some way, our story could also be related to some philosophy, or, as I think, can also bring some food for thinking for the philosophers. But if you ask to me personally, the way in which it happened is that the stories are not only what design do is not only also a kind of telling story and therefore making some philosophy, but it's also making some politics. Because in the moment in which we propose something, we normally we support existing systems, and so we make existing system we think that they could work better, or we propose a different systems. And if we propose different systems, we are proposing new political interactions. So in some way, willing or not, when we make a design choice, we make an ethical choice, but at the same time, we make also a political choice. Sometimes it's evident and sometimes not. But if we talk about, as could be the issue about our conversation, what design can do for the transition toward an ecological society, given that we had a non-ecological society and we want to go to an ecological society, we want to go to a just society, and we have an unjust society. So if we could do something to promote this kind of change, we are participating in a very peculiar way to a political action. That is what, in my word, is the politics of the everyday. That is not exactly the same of the politics of the party, of course, but it's another way of participating. And finally, given that you have an interest on myself, well, in my case, given that what I'm telling now is a design could also play a role, a kind of activist in the change of things. But in my case, I've been, before I was an activist, and afterward I discovered design. So I'm not a designer that discovered, oh, look, we could have also play a kind of political role. I was very committed in, let's say, generally speaking, political issue. And at a certain point, I discovered it happened to me to get in touch with design, with what was the design of the 70s. And I say, well, this could be interesting. And therefore, I started. And you said before very kindly that I initiated different area of design in between them, service design, strategic design, and afterward design for social innovation. But it has always been looking for something that could be more effective in this transition that has to be done. And it has, at least for me, for some many people, it was clear already 30 years ago that in some way we had to face a systemic change. So we were talking about transition also in the 70s. That is not 30s, 40 years ago now, or 50.
Well, thank you. We will come back to this activism and the fact that when adopting or talking about the story, you also make political choices, because I'm very curious on your take on the changes of the world today, and I'm not sure that everybody wants the world to go in a good direction. But let's talk a little bit now about one of the most important, most interesting projects and projects that you have been nurturing and constructed yourself around the world is the DESIS network. This is a network I would really like you to explain to our readers what is the DESIS network, and moreover, what are the principles? If you can a little bit explain about the principles of the DESIS network, small, local, open, and connected initiatives. And if you can also make examples, that would be, there are the agricultural initiatives in Milan, Nutrire Milano, or there is the Casa del Quartiere in Turin, but I'm sure they're not the only ones. I would like you to, if you can, explain about this child of yours.
Yes, but now you made two questions that are overlapping, but they are different stories. One story is the story of the DESIS, and the other story is what we call social innovation, and in particular, if and how design can play a role.
Yes.
Maybe to tell the story in a simpler way, let's start from the second one and then move to the DESIS. The second one is what is social innovation and what design can do. And you mentioned a formula that I have to say, now I'm very old. So also something that I said is very old. I used this term maybe 30 years ago, and it's still, in my view at least, it's still valid.
Absolutely. And in some parts of the world, like here, very valid.
Yes, it's only, let's say, it has been said when the experiences was very few. So the formula is really a formula. Nowadays, it's still valid, but there are so many real examples that could, in some way, make that formula better. But in any case, let's go step by step. The background is the perception that a certain model or way of doing and way of thinking and way of consuming and way of using and the idea of what is the quality of the life, that has been very strong, at least in the West, and has been also in some way very successful for the good and for the bad around the world with this American or European, but afterward became American way of life. So that way of life and all the system of production that was beyond, it became clear that it was generating problems, social problems, not only for the very poor, but also in the middle class, and also environmental problems. So the environmental problem became also the one more strong to say it cannot work like this. And therefore there was many people thinking that something had to change. People as me, but many others in design, was already working on design for sustainability. And we was making projects, little projects, big projects, some ideas. So we were proposing some ideas of how a life could be to be more sustainable and just. And this is why we developed product design was not enough, because what we discovered at that time, that if you have a product and you make this product much, much green, what happens is the so-called boomerang effect. Yeah. The project is so good that people buy a lot. And then at the end of the story, you have a consumption that is more than before.
Exactly.
So it was clear that this had happened with the car. The car of the 80s and 90s and 20s was much, much better than the car of the 50s. But the problem was that the number exploded. So it was clear that we need to have good green products, but at the same time, something has to change, and to change the mentality and change also the economy, because the car also exists because somebody has to produce them. So we were fighting to find something, and this was called the design for sustainability. And it was how we can have systemic change that can move in that direction. But at a certain point, me, but many others, it's not only me, you're very kind to say that I opened something, but luckily I have not been alone. We started to observe that in society there was somebody that already were behaving in a different way. And therefore, having people that was already by their own choice doing things in a way that was much better by the social and by the environmental point of view, it became much more than our ideas, because our ideas was only hypothesis, and people could say, yes, but this is your student's idea, so whoever can do it is impossible. let's say if we had imagined, because we also have imagined to have people living nearby and sharing some services, so the collaborative living, it could say, yeah, but this is your idea, Professor Manzini, who will never make something like that.
Communism.
Well, this is another story. In your case, it could be even more complicated. Now I
Yeah.
tell you how it was perceived
Yeah.
in the Western, in the ex-communist country. It
Yeah.
could be more difficult. But in any case, it could appear idea of somebody. If you see that there are people that were doing it, choosing to do it, because there are a lot of advantage. You can have a small apartment. At the same time, you can have some service that you can share with the other that you will not have alone. So it's a very simple principle that collaborating, you can have some result that you could not have alone. And therefore, they were starting to do it. I use this example on co-housing, but you could have the first, I don't know, food co-op that put people together to get the food, the beginning of the carpooling, using the car, given that you have one car with four places, or seats have people in the four places. So there was people doing practically, when we put the right glasses, we observed that practically in every area of the daily life, there was somebody doing something that appeared, again, for sure against what was the mainstream way of telling things, that was saying people are hyper-individualistic, they don't want to do anything with the others, and so this was what the marketing was telling. But in the reality, we found that there was somebody doing something in a different way. So this was really the very beginning, 20 years ago now. And worldwide, this happened more in the modernized part of the society and less in the less modernized part of the society. But in any case, the modernized part of society was not only Europe and America, but you had, for instance, also in China, for instance, because in China there are different layers. There are some layers that are very modernized. And we could find something similar everywhere, and the name was social innovation. And now the story is very long, I cannot tell you the story. Let's say social innovation always existed, but it happens in different ways, in different waves. And we was observing a particular wave of social innovation that was happening in the modernized part of the society at the beginning of this century. And therefore we said, okay, but those people are not only proposing the ideas, that was the idea similar to the one that we invented, but they are also doing a prototype. So they are showing that it's possible to do it. And this has been the big idea of the design for social innovation, because it was not only to say, look, we could create a new food network. Yes, but who know how can? No, look, somebody is doing it, and they do it in that way. Of course, afterward, people says, yes, but they are very special people. Okay, very frequently, the one that start are very special people. But nevertheless, they are people, and this is practical. And for who is designer knows the difference in between a prototype and the final product. So the prototype show that the idea could work, and afterward you have to work on the prototype and to see how we can move from the prototype to something that could be accessible in the market, etc. So the first food co-op, the first carpooling, the first collaborative living, the first neighborhood reshaping, were really prototype. But now we can say after, given that I'm talking about 20 years ago, in these 20 years, a lot of things happened. And so there have been an evolution. And I have to say, for the good and for the bad. For the bad, meaning that there are some very successful stories that are monsters. Because Uber, for instance, is the grandson of the carpooling. And Airbnb is the grandson of people sharing some room in a house. And Amazon is the grandson of a new kind of second-hand market that started to happen. So the idea was so good that it started, and instead of maintaining the quality that we liked at the beginning, moved in the wrong direction. And of course, designer played a role, because at a certain point, maybe the original idea was not generated by designer, but the normal capability of people to design. But at a certain point, when the issue goes on to move from the prototype that can be invented and set up by more or less whoever, they become something that can spread and become successful, you need more technical tools and more technical knowledge to do it. And therefore, the designer enters, and as in the three monsters that I mentioned before, turn it toward entering in the most dangerous economy that is happening in the world now, that is the way in which the platform economy evolved toward a new kind of this gig economy, a kind of new slavery practically. And the designer played a very big role, because they did something very well designed by a certain point of view, but losing the original meanings. But some others not. If we have some very famous, in my view, monsters, we have a quantity also of good examples in which the designer helped the process to evolve, to be more heroic, so can be done by more normal people, but maintaining some quality. So this is the story of social innovation. This is the story of why design can play a role, and can play a role in both the direction. It's very important to play the role in the, at least for who want to go toward the future, because the only future is ecological. There are no other future. Toward the future.
You're still convinced by this?
Yeah. No, the other future is catastrophic, yes.
Okay.
The catastrophe is a future, but it's not really a future.
So despite everything we hear, we should be convinced that the future of the planet is ecological, and that's it.
No, yes, but again, what we know working in society, in particular, that is not necessary that you start with a very strong general idea and afterward you organize a community garden. Maybe you simply like to have a garden.
Yes.
You like to make a community garden, and doing the community garden, progressively you understand that the city could be different and the planet could be different, and maybe become more aware of the risks. So I do not think that if you don't have clear, so that the practice generate ideas and not only. So as probably in our conversation will appear many times, there is a double link, chicken and the egg. It's not possible to say you have first the idea or first you act. Depends, the two things. But in my view, the idea cannot happen, cannot exist without some action, and the action needs some ideas. And the way, in the experience of social innovation, the people not necessarily at the beginning have a very clear idea on the possible implication of what they do. They do something because at that moment it appears locally very interesting. And afterward, maybe in time, they also understand that it's not only for them or not only for the small community, but there is a meaning also for the larger people. So this is the very general frame where we are working. Given that I work in the university, I always done projects, so I am designer in some way. And not in some way, I'm designer.
Yes.
I'm designer. We was started to think that, first of all, in the School of Design, there was a responsibility. And secondly, that in how you teach design normally, you teach design in making projects. So if you think that this will be possible to give some projects that have some brief, that have some social, ethical, cultural meaning, the student do projects. So there is some results. So in some way, one of the principles of design for social innovation is to recognize some non-used resource. And the students and the teachers are non-used resource, because in the moment in which they are learning how to become a good designer in the next 10 years, they are doing something. And what they are doing is not used normally.
Oh.
The idea is if we create a frame that permits to give more value, not only to the process of learning, but also the process of doing that they have to do while they learn, and therefore to give a value to the result. And this has been the idea of having labs in the School of Design, of the teachers, researchers, and students that are working in this direction and that are doing something. At the same time, they need information, they need experiences. So the possibility to exchange some information could help them to learn better, but also to make better the work that they are doing. And this is the beginning of the story. So we decided that was not the overall school, because the school have also other preoccupation, also reasonably, but we liked to have in the school, when it was possible, somebody that was really very edgy on this position. So the labs have to be recognized by the school. So the school has to say, yes, we have this lab and we are happy, but it's not said that what the labs do is the position of the school, because the position of the school has to keep in account of many other things, where these labs try to be very punctual, very activist, very capable to take some issue in also if it is a difficult one. And this has been the reason to do it. And when we started, nobody was talking about this. So there had been also the need, practically the first motivation of the DESI's lab was to spread the voice that it was possible for design to work on social innovation. Beginning of the story, the main motivation, frankly speaking, was to try to reinforce, because the school A could say, look, in the school B, they are doing like this, so maybe we can do the same. So try to reinforce each other in a moment in which was not so easily accepted. Nowadays, 15 years later, we don't have anymore the need to spread, except from some area that we would like to be, but we are not. But in general, it's not anymore an issue about number, because practically, at least in the area that I know, all the good schools are working more or less in, not all the school, but there are somebody working in this direction. So we cannot say that. So every school has a design lab. It's not necessarily. What we want to do now is that there is a new culture that has to be developed. So more than to grow in a number, we try to be a place for reflection and for try to make some step forward. What could be the most easy things that the designer can do, but to develop more knowledge about this. So this is now the way in which we work. We try to maintain the network and create opportunity to exchange experience on specific topic and to try to generate some new knowledge.
So if you have to give me an example that is that you really like, you know, when you saw something coming out of one of those labs that ticked all the points in your mind, what would that be?
But the labs works in, given the social innovation is a 360 degree of every activities we have had, and we have DESI's lab that works in many different topics, depending from the teacher, the place, etc. But just to move to what we are doing now, one way of working is we call it thematic cluster. That means DESIS is a very light network, so there is no infrastructure, there is nothing. There is only a website and a group that manage it, but the different labs, they can find themselves and do something together. So, for instance, this thematic, the last two thematic clusters that appeared are one is what does it mean to develop a DESIS lab in the margin. The margin is a way to say the very poor, the very fragile, etc. Because until now, mainly it's very different if you work with the students. For instance, let's say in Milano, you work with a student in a certain neighborhoods that for sure is not the richest, but it's a kind of middle-class neighborhoods. And the teacher and student and the people there are more or less the same. And this happened, and there have been a lot of activities that have been done in several neighborhoods. It's different if you work in the prison. It's different if you work in one area that is really, really very bad by every point of view. Or if you are not in Milano, if you work in a favela in Rio, or in a slum in a place in Africa. So what does it mean when we try to work with people that are really very far, very diverse from us? And this is not easy because we are not there for charity. We are there for trying to create collaboration, but there is a very deep issue. So it's not the same if we work as designer with people that could be more or less us, or if we work as designer trying to support people that are so diverse. So this is one very deep topic, as you can understand. Another topic that we are developing now that is very, in my view, very contemporary is what does it mean if we can talk about social innovation and more than human? So there is a discussion, I don't know in Romania, but everywhere in the world, that says we are not only the human being in our system, so there are other entities. So what does it mean to develop social change that in some way keep in account that we are not alone? And so the question is this idea of the extended community. So can we imagine, and it's possible, imagine that the one that collaborate to take some decision in relation to something that to happen include also somebody that is representative of some animals or representatives of the river. And of course, here there are a lot also philosophical questions to be developed in this. What does it mean a non-anthropocentric community? That is probably
Also ethical questions, I imagine.
I think. So this is to give you an idea of the two last topic. And this means that in different schools, there are a group of people that are working on this subject. Another one, much more classical, was design for city making. So this is a topic that lasted and involved many different schools and was the one that both to work on the city of proximity or the 15-minute city, more or less.
Very interesting. Well, I think I'm going to jump because I'm very excited about the whole, I mean, idea about globalization, localization. I would like to jump to a little bit to the concept, your concept, one of your most distinctive concepts, which is cosmopolitan localism. And I'm trying to understand how we can apply this to Romanian position between Eastern and Western European cultural influences. So we talk about communities that are deeply rooted in place, but globally connected. Communities that are neither parochial nor placeless. You were proposing with this concept a third way, so somewhere between localization and globalization. I think the point is very, very, very actual today, when I think you would agree with me that we do see the decline of globalization. So this third way, what is the role of this third way today? I'm trying also to get it back to, Romania, a country between East and West. What can we learn from the third way?
Well, first of all, as you can imagine, I cannot say anything about Romania. I've been 2 days in Romania until now in my life. So it's up to you to see if it makes sense. But you are totally right saying that that idea, the cosmopolitan localism, the term has not been invented by me. It's a term that existed in a certain area of eco-social things. And means what you said. So it means if we imagine our society as an ecosystem, everybody knows that the ecosystem has to be very diverse. So everything that homogenizes is a kind of reduction of the diversity of the ecosystem. So the ecological society has to be a society very diverse. And so to maintain also the cultural diversity is very important. And every time that we lose a dialect, every time that you lose a way of doing things that was specific of a place, it's a kind of reduction in the positive complexity of the ecosystems. So this is the basic point. So one of the risks, afterward has been called the globalization, but in any case, the risk of being connected with the flow of material, information, etc., is the homogenization. And the homogenization is a kind of cultural desertification. So diversity is important, but as it happens in a society, in the biological ecology, everything is connected. So, and nothing exists alone. Everything exists in something different. So now I don't want to push the metaphor of the ecological biosystem to the one that we are talking now, because afterward of course, there are some differences. But what we should have in mind is this ecosystemic notion. That is, at the same time, to evaluate diversity as a value, and at the same time creating connection and not island of separated groups. This was available 40 years ago when the idea of this cosmopolitan localism emerged. And of course, we have had practically every intervention that is done at the local scale, trying to maintain some cultural element and maybe open it to some flow of people and money. But afterward, how much flow? Not so much, because otherwise it kills. So in any case, there is a very long story about how to find this kind of combination of opening enough, not to be, because to be closed, it has to be died. So to be open, but at the same time not to be overwhelmed from what can come from outside. And as you can imagine, there is no one formula if not having clear some principle. And the principle is the value of diversity and the need of being connected at the same time. And you say, but they are opposite. Yes, but quasi everything that we can deal in the moment in which we discover the complexity is in between two things. Nothing is white or black. It's always a tension, and it has not to become gray. So it's not only that we have to maintain, we are not the white and the black, but we don't have to create everything kind of homogeneous gray. So this is why we talk about design. So design is with wicked problems. So this is typically, there is no one specific solution. You have to have, if you can, some ideas, and afterward, case by case, navigate. Okay. But this was valuable until a few years ago, let's say. And when the globalization happened, of course, we have had the anti-globalization movement that was taking the idea that globalization was seen as a way to reduce this diversity. But I think that the best way to talk about it was the alter globalization, so a different kind of globalization. So in my view, we should not be against the fact to see ourselves as a human being, as a global families. So I'm not against the idea that we have to be connected, but we have to understand in which way. And for a long period, there was a push toward globalization equal homogenization, so everything gray. And the push was the value of diversities. Now things become even more complicated because I don't have to tell all the story that you know as me or better than me. That kind of globalization seems to be over. New kind of tension, and the multiculturalism is interpreted as big empires that are preparing themselves to fight one against the other ones. And this is super dangerous. It's super dangerous, obviously. So in some way, we have to keep the relationships. And I think that one of the many things, area in which we should work is exactly to build bridges, to maintain relationships. So especially, for instance, before we were talking about DAGES. DAGES is a very small network, but we do our best to maintain in the network everybody, and not to say, no, we are the network of the good against the network of the bad. We are the network of the people that are doing certain things. And if they are in China or in America, it's okay. And hopefully it will be also in Russia, but at the moment we don't have a DAGES lab in Russia. But if there was some DAGES lab in Russia, they will be welcome. So this issue about, it's become much more complicated in the past, but the core issue is the same. How to maintain and in some way rearrange, requalify some local stories, because they are very important, maintaining openness with the others. And afterward, when you move, there is this issue now about war. But there are also some more practical, so no, this unfortunately is very practical, also that one. But let's say other area, for instance, in place as Italy, there is an issue about tourism and over-tourism that is killing the cities. So the dealing of what's called a sustainable tourism, that is not only that the tourists have to come with the electric bus, or they are not to drink with a straw in plastic. They should come with electric bus and drink with the plastic. But if the number is the one that we start to see, even if they do not have a plastic straw, and if they come with the electric bus, they are not sustainable.
Too many.
Too many. They are killing the reality of the cities.
So in reality, what you're saying, in every domain, as our grandparents knew precisely, balance and not too much, not too little. It's this third way, maybe, in a sense.
Yes, in some, this could be, it tells at least one thing, that is not yes and not no. So we are in an open society. We should be in an open society, even though now they are also closed in some way. So we have to be open, but at the same time, we have to try to see what does mean to maintain some element of the diversity that characterized. And the case of tourism, if you want, is very peculiar, but the people come in the place because the place has something to see and to show, something particular, and coming so many, they kill the same thing that they wanted to see. So they transform a city in a Disneyland. And so this is the killing of the original quality of the place. So how we can balance. Again, there is no one specific formula, if not at least to recognize that a city can also die for excess of success. And there are also the ones that die because they have no success, so they are dying because they become nothing, so nothing happens. Unfortunately, there are many places in the world that are like this. And there are other ones that become so attractive that not only the tourist, but also the finance and the real estate comes and change, and everything explodes, as it's happening in many cities in Italy, but also in London, but also in all the cities. They become, for some reason, in Barcelona, they are attractive. So it's a very difficult work to what does it mean cosmopolitan localism, considering something that was not so clear 30 years ago. Now it's very clear what is happening.
Mm. Two more questions. I have many, many other questions, but for the purpose of our interview today, in the societies that are happening very rapid technological and social change. So I'm now focusing a little bit on technology with your permission. How do you think that design can help preserve what is valuable from the past and facilitate the necessary transition? And with this question, the smaller one, new designers, how are they going to, how should they look at the past, integrating it into the future, using technology in order to preserve?
But let's start from the first part. As you can imagine, my first answer is there is no formula. So
Yes.
we need, so what we should have is to be very capable to look to the reality without stereotype. So to something very, very frequently, including myself, we have a stereotype, so we don't see really what is happening. We see what we imagine that is happening. And sometimes what we imagine is not what is happening really. And also what are the real risks, and if and how there are some resources. And some resources, I mean social resources, cultural resources, where you can try. But I think that the idea that what comes from the tradition, if you don't do anything, die, as we see everywhere. So the story is to recognize the tradition where there is a tradition, and to understand in which way the tradition can be regenerated, to give the opportunity to the people to have some element that we consider positive of the transition in the new conditions. And afterward, of course, every area is different, because there has been a lot of study and work on craftsmanship. So what does it mean to regenerate craftsmanship? And this is, it appears simple, but in reality, it's a super complex issue, because all the story about craftsmanship, at least in my view, is a very slippery, because we should have a very strong consciousness of what is craft. And this is not so obvious. In any case, there are some craftsmanship that still remain. What does it mean to maintain it and to regenerate it? And as I said, this can be done. But there is also the cities, how we can maintain some differences in the city. So maintaining some spirit of the city, but at the same time accepting that the city it's a life organism, so it has to change, it has to modify, it has to be linked to the others. And I can continue. But so what the designer can do. So when you start to see things in this way, at the end, there is not the very general topic, but very specific topic. So for instance, if we take a city and we take Barcelona, for instance, not to talk about an Italian city that I know enough because I worked there. All the story about regenerating the fabric of Barcelona, what was called the superillas, the super blocks, it's a good idea. They try in some way to maintain some elements that are classical of Barcelona in the new way, regenerating also the way of being inhabitant of Barcelona. So not being linked only to the one that has been in Barcelona since centuries, but including also the new migrants that arrived and stabilized there. And going inside in this city-making issue, trying to maintain Barcelona against the risk to be overwhelmed by the tourism. In the case of Barcelona, you have several different projects, and the project could be Decidim, that is a digital platform. The project could be some new way of integrating the migrants in some kind of craftsman work. It could be the way of developing some cultural element and bringing the cultural element also to the tourist, but in some way not reducing, maintaining the tourist, searching for what's called a quality tourist. So I mean, when you start to enter in, there is no one formula general. You have to enter inside, and this is transformed in many small or medium-sized projects that altogether have the idea to maintain some element of Barcelona and so on. I can give you another example.
Please.
We have in many countries, I think also, but I don't know in Romania, but for sure in many countries that I know, there is an issue about health. All the story about health, even the countries that have a welfare state, as we, for some reason is collapsing. And it's collapsing both because we have government that are doing not what they should do, but frankly speaking, also because the society changes so much, and that kind of welfare is not the welfare that we need today. And looking at how to regenerate the welfare, we are moving now toward the idea of the community welfare. So the welfare that is not only the professional, but in some way try to involve also the communities. In a place, for instance, a small village as the one where I live, there are still some remain of the pre-modern communities. That means in a small block of group of houses on the top of the hill, they still have relationships and they still have a way to look after each other. I think that this happened also. So in my wording, these are remaining of the pre-modern communities that have this capability to care. Therefore, everybody there is not totally alone. And so they are not totally depending from some professional nurse or some professional social worker, because still exists something. So to go to your, why this is related to your question, because this remaining of the pre-modern community is a value.
Yes.
But if we don't do anything, it's going to disappear.
Right.
So the issue is to imagine a public system that not only deliver the professional services, but is also capable to help and to support this kind of communities, we care community of care, and to give them recognition, to help them to survive in the new conditions. So this, in my view, is a way to maintain something of the past, that is the community, the care, as it was in the past, in face to the change of demographic change, whatever kind of change, and to see how the public can help this kind of community to exist. And so it's not only the services that are directly delivered, but also the capability of the public to create a kind of platform that help this community to help each other.
It's an excellent example. Romania is, I think, top country in Europe when it comes to diseases that can be treated by a healthier lifestyle. So, and also a very, very aging population, rural, but the elements of pre-modern communities that you're mentioning still exist. So I think that's a very valuable lesson you're saying.
If you are interested, if I can make a little bit of advertisement, my last book that is not translated until now, it's only in Italian, but you read Italian, is called Fare insieme, to do together, and the subtitle is Toward a New Generation of Collaborative Public Services. So this is the idea that the service, the public service today, I made the example in health that is clearer probably, but the same is available practically in every area.
Education also, I guess.
Education, we have the school, and the school can also play a role in the neighborhoods. So we have it. It's called Patti Educativi, Educational Pact. That is the relationship between the school and what happens in the neighborhoods. So there is this proposal that already exists in some way, but not only some cases, to reimagine the public services, not only as organizations that deliver a very specific service, but organizations that deliver a service because they have also to deliver a specific service, but at the same time, they generate a kind of platform that permit to the community to reorganize and to, in some way, be alive, help each other, and do what is needed.
Excellent. Last question. So, you witness design evolving from being about products to addressing complex social and environmental systems. As we face the global challenges of today, which are not few, and as you said, very dangerous, what gives you hope when you look and observe the emerging design practices? What gives you hope?
Well, in these days, to have hope, you have to be really very strong because it's not so easy. But luckily, I always say also to the students, luckily, reality is very complex. So the complexity of reality sometimes could be also in some way astonishing for us. So too much complexity. But the complexity in reality is good. We have more risk for simplification than for complexity. But in any case, why I'm talking about complexity now? That there is no one single big machine of the evil. In the reality, there are many different people doing different things. So the issue is to put the right glasses and to look to the reality with the right glasses, trying to look where there is something that goes in the direction that we think that is the positive one. So it's also, again, it's an ethical choice, and all the design starts from an ethical choice, because if we do something that has to be for the good, it means that we make an ethical choice, consciously or not. So you have to have your idea. So for instance, for me, you remember you was talking about SLOC, small, local, open and connected, still valid, but very abstract. Now, I don't tell you all but for me, there are now 3 words that are the ones that summarize. That is collaborative, collaboration, proximity, and care. So it's good whatever help people to collaborate. It's good whatever help people to be in proximity. That's a little bit SLOC. And it's good whatever, and this is the core of everything, to move from being only in an attitude that is effectiveness or efficiency or shallowness, to be shallow in everything, but to take care. That means to take your time to look and to be open to something, somebody else. So for me, these 3 are not a kind of magic formula, but are 3 kind of lighthouse that gives the direction. And afterward, you have to look in the reality what you find. Given that these 3 are very simple and banal, but no, they are not banal, but they are very simple and human, understandable, I think, from everybody. But if you consider all the line in which the main trends are pushing are totally not for collaboration, not for being in proximity, and not to taking care. Even the designer. So you design for having people that are not to take care for this and that. So these 3 terms are totally in contradiction with the other one. If you put the right glasses and look around and search for examples where people care, where people act in proximity, where people collaborate, you can find it. And therefore, to be optimist in this moment, you need to have the right glasses. The one that permit, and also the attitude. So the glasses, and take your time to look at it. Because if you don't have the glasses and you don't give time, you see only the awful things that are happening, and you cannot be optimist. But I don't know if I am optimist in general on what will happen. I'm optimist on the fact that if I look around, I find people that are doing something that has a spark of what should be, and even more than spark. It's not only small things. Sometimes there are also some policy. Sometimes there are also some cities that are doing some. So the important thing is to have some direction, and that direction comes from you or from your ethical position. And afterward, to look, to take the time to look in the reality with the right glasses, and to try to work on what of positive exists, and something can happen.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a privilege again and an honor. I will take with me the glasses, which I hope they're right, but also these three words, these three key concepts, which you leave me thinking, and I'm sure our viewers and our listeners will also keep thinking, because they are very beautiful and very profound principles: the proximity, the collaboration, and more importantly, maybe of all, the care. So thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today.
Sure.
And let's remain optimists with the right glasses.
Proximity maybe soon.
Yes, thank you. Vă mulțumim că ne-ați urmărit, sperăm că v-a fost de folos și vă invităm în comunitatea noastră a Societății Omului Sănătos.